Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing well and staying healthy. These are certainly extraordinary times to be doing anything, let alone taking classes in the college environment. Um, I apologize in advance for the late communication about this video. Things have certainly been busy in our world dealing with kind of the response to COVID 19 and how the university has responded. So that has certainly kept me busy. But I wanted to get a short, somewhat short, I should say, announcement video out to you all and kind of a walkthrough of how to create and deliver effective presentations. Um, so, a couple of announcements. I'll be working on grading your online engagement experience submissions very soon here. You should expect to see grades for those very soon. I apologize for the delay on that as well. Um, Coming up very soon. So, this week we were talking about creating and delivering effective presentations. So, I'll have that video for you this week. The only thing you need to do for that is to simply watch this YouTube video so that you understand that. And then, of course, you can start working on your presentation and that sort of thing. Um, the other thing that is coming up very soon is the Why Am I Here paper. Um, those details are posted in the assignments tab. So if you have questions about that, take a look here. Read the syllabus. Well, it's actually not in the syllabus. I forgot we added that late. So take a look in the assignments. If you have questions, certainly let me know. If you have questions about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out because, like I said, these are times where we definitely need to stay as connected as possible. Um, and then, of course, the only other thing that is pressing that you need to be working on is your final project and presentation, which we're talking about that today. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Um, I don't know exactly how long um, this video will be. I'm going to try to keep it short because I know sitting in class for 50 minutes versus watching a video of somebody talking are vastly different things. So I'll try to keep this within a reasonable time limit. Um, so when we're delivering effective presentations, there's lots of things that we need to consider. Most importantly is engagement. So I'm kind of in a sense grading myself in today's session. And if you didn't notice, I got to this by going to files. Well, not files. It should be under modules. And then if you scroll down here at the bottom, you'll see helpful resources delivering effective presentations. And that's where you get to this. Um, you can also download the file if you would prefer, but this is how you get to this if you want to take a look at it yourself. If I scroll down here, this is what we'll be talking about today. How to deliver an effective presentation, talking a little bit about a visual aid, and then especially how to create a good visual aid. So PowerPoint is the example that I said here, but there's certainly a variety of visual aids. You could use um, Prezi or eMaze or Google Slides or whatever new forms of technology emerge that can help you present information in a unique and creative way to your audience. Okay, so you all have probably been a part of a really boring presentation, whether it be for your college class or for um, your own enjoyment. Maybe you went to just a really bad performance by a comedian or something like that, and that is just the worst because you are kind of obligated to stay there, but it's just a miserable experience. So, as a presenter, you have to do your best to keep your audience engaged. And here are some ways that we can do that. Um, so, here are some aspects of an effective presentation. I had already talked a little bit about engagement. Now, what does that look like when it comes to a academic presentation? Uh, if you can remember back from when we actually had class, I would ask you guys questions, whether they be rhetorical, i.e., not expecting a response, or maybe I asked you as a poll, how many of you have done this? Calling on you individually. Those are great ways to engage your audience because it forces people to pay more attention. Because if you're called upon and you weren't paying attention, what does that make? That makes you look bad, right? So that helps maintain audience engagement. You also want to have a good message. So if you as a presenter are disheveled and you're not sure what you're talking about and the audience has trouble following you, it will certainly be difficult. It will be a difficult presentation in general. So having a clear message, and I'll frame this to your final project. So for your final project, you need to talk about your major or the major that you are thinking about pursuing. So what you ideally don't want to do is say, I'm thinking about these 3 different majors. You may very well be thinking about 3 different majors, but let's try to narrow it down to at least one, so that you can really focus and hone in on that so it's not confusing for the audience to follow. For a visual aid, we've talked about that a little bit. It's important to have a visual aid because you want something that the audience can follow along with. So for example, if I was just talking at you without any of this on the screen, it would probably be somewhat difficult to follow where I'm going. And oh my gosh, how long is he going to stay on this slide? Okay. And then audience involvement and engagement are very similar. Ideally, you want, you get engagement. They're kind of, if you have one, the other one is kind of bolstered by it. So having your audience involved in your presentation, whether that means they're actively listening, they're responding to your questions, maybe you have activities for them to do, that bolsters their engagement in your presentation. And you can have engagement without audience involvement. But I highly recommend ways to involve your audience because it can be very difficult to set through a long presentation. Okay. A couple of things that I want to talk to you about in regards to your presentation for this class. I am fully aware that public speaking isn't easy. Certainly it's easier in this environment because we're not in front of everybody. But when we're in that environment where we're talking in front of, 10 to 15 people, it isn't easy to do that. So I recognize that, and I just want you to know that this is really more of a practice run for everyone here. I know some of you, I believe maybe 1 or 2 of you had taken COM 210 already. This is kind of like a practice run for COM 210. So if you're nervous about that, this will give you a good idea of what it's like to present in COM 210 and kind of get you up to that level. I talked a little bit about rhetorical questions already, so I'll kind of skip over that, but I do want to emphasize that timing throughout your presentation does matter. Be intentional with where you include polls or rhetorical questions or audience involvement. For our presentation, it being 3 to 5 minutes long, it doesn't matter as much, but especially longer presentations, you want something kind of in the middle or in the latter part of the presentation to make sure people are still paying attention, especially if it's a long presentation, such as an hour or more. And then lastly, maintain that eye contact. When we're talking about recording the video, what I would just encourage you to do is just make sure you're focusing on the camera. Do a couple practice videos where you're not actually presenting your information, but you're just getting down where you need to be looking at and how loud you need to be and that sort of thing. So you have a good idea of that. One thing that I highly encourage you to do, you can do it with this particular presentation, and then what I would encourage you to do is to continue doing that with future presentations. and that is practice. Now, I'm sure you have probably heard you should practice things and you get better at it, right? Okay, yeah, I mean that, but also in this case, I really do mean deliver your presentation multiple times. Um, I have a good example of this. So, if you guys are familiar with TED Talks, I presented at a TEDx conference when they came to Ball State. That video is available on YouTube. I'll post it in the announcements in case you want to take a look at it. So for this, obviously, I was really excited for the opportunity, but I was also extremely nervous because I didn't want to screw this up, right? Because it's being recorded, it's going to be put on YouTube. You know, like if I accidentally cough too much or I say the same thing over and over again as I transition, that looks really bad, right? And the way, and I also didn't want to forget information of the most importance to me. And the way that you get to that level is not through trying to cram information, but practicing it because you have to understand and remember through repetition how to deliver your material. So, in the case of this class, you know, I don't mind if you use note cards, but I am going to be even more impressed if you can recall your information via just a lot of practice. So I would encourage you to do that. And I had read, I can't remember who the author of this research article was, but um, it was when I was doing this TEDx presentation that this particular author highly recommended getting into the environment where you're going to deliver that presentation. And if it's for a class, then you go to that class and actually deliver your presentation there. Um, and especially with the age of technology that we live in, record yourself, watch it back, see what you did wrong. Maybe you said so too much. That's one of my big faults is I say so this, so that as I'm transitioning. Um, but just look for those things that you might want to improve upon. This will not only help you memorize your content and have a better delivery, but it also help you really polish your presentation. Just like what I was talking to you with papers. The more you write and review and revise and go through that process, the better it gets. Okay. The other thing that this helps you do is quote unquote dummy proof your presentation. So just like a paper, you know, have somebody look at it and make sure it makes sense to them. Because if your presentation doesn't make sense to your friend who maybe knows very little or maybe they know a lot about your topic, then it is probably not going to make sense to just a random audience. So I would always have, you know, my wife or my mom or whoever was around take a look at my stuff to make sure that there weren't any silly typos or maybe this slide just didn't make any sense because you really want to use your visual aid as a guide for you. You want to show the audience enough information so that they understand what you're talking about, but also not too much so that they can basically ignore you. You want to kind of find a good balance there, and we'll go through some examples of that so that you can really see what I mean by that. Okay. These are some things that I use to kind of grade visual aids or critique them, so to speak. So the eye test, when I talk about the eye test, I'm saying I just take a quick glance at this and see, okay, is there too much text on this slide? What are the colors looking like? Are they easy to look at, or is it, you know, painful? Is it too bright, too dark? All those sorts of things. You've probably noticed that I've done this a couple of times throughout the slide, but you never want to just say, when you hop up for a presentation and say, visual aids, they're great for maintaining audience engagement, can be too heavily relied upon. Don't just read directly off your slides. You want to give yourself broad topics. So if you've noticed, you know, like this particular slide, I gave broad topics and then some points to cover. On other ones, I just put a topic so that you can cover that. So it's really up to you in terms of what is best. Apologize for that. What is best for you. For others, this may be a good fit. Ideally, you really want to avoid putting paragraphs of information on a slide. You want to try to keep it to short, punchy information points, so that way you don't get confused throughout your presentation either, because you really don't want to be just directly reading or, trailing off into a huge statement. This isn't as applicable now, but as far as when you're presenting, try to use a presentation slide clicker, so that you don't have to stand by the computer or hunker behind the computer. For this, you don't necessarily have to worry about that so much. Ideally, when you deliver your presentation, I would recommend that you record yourself, standing somewhere delivering that presentation. Maybe that looks like you have a computer beside you and you're just flipping through the slides. I know not everybody has the same technology, so I'll be flexible with that. I'm certainly not expecting a one-size-fits-all approach. But in normal presentations where we've got the classroom setting, absolutely want to use that so you don't have to hide behind the computer or the technology. When you're delivering a presentation, you also want to know your audience. So, for example, when I was practicing for the TED Talk, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to use necessarily group activities or handouts and stuff like that, because I was in an auditorium where people really couldn't easily move around. In theory, they could have maybe done that, but you have to think about what the limitations are of that sort of thing. So for this particular presentation, think about what might work and what might not work. So for example, obviously handouts are not going to work because we're not all together. Could you ask some rhetorical questions? Yeah. Could you ask a poll? Yeah. Why not? These are some things you could personally use in your individual presentations to get the audience involved and watching that presentation. Now, in the case of this one, normally everyone would get to see everybody's presentation. I may share a couple of really good examples of presentations with the group just so you can see it, but don't feel like I'm going to share your presentation with the whole class, just because of the nature of how things have changed. That's how I've decided to approach that. And the last thing about audience involvement, and this is a tough one, I simplify it down to just 3 words, but never give up on your audience. It can be really easy when you have an audience that is, uninterested in your presentation or not engaged. Maybe it looks like they're, playing on their phones or not paying attention to you. It can be really easy to get frustrated and just blaze through your information and get done. But keep going back to the well on this one. Keep asking them questions, using different activities to get them engaged, because who knows, they may actually be engaged and you don't know it, or maybe that next activity will be what pulls them in. Okay, you just can't just give up on them because you're frustrated as a presenter, and that's really difficult to do, because I certainly have fallen into that trap before with teaching in general. So just practice that, and it's okay to fail, just as long as you know, okay, I got frustrated there and I'm going to work on that next time. We talked about the various different types of visual aids already, and some of this information, so I'm going to kind of go through this quickly here. I think the most important thing here is, if your aid is not appealing, it'll typically just crash the presentation, because if your aid is hard to follow, in the sense that maybe the print is really small or the colors are really bright, it will quickly shut your audience off to your presentation. So that's why it's crucial that we talk about good visual aids. So I want to show you some visual aids and kind of talk to you about good and bad examples of visual aids. So typically in the classroom, we would go through this together and talk about what's not good about this and what is good and so forth. Okay, so this first example is a really bad example of a visual aid. So it looks like this particular example was for a course, and it was a map of ideas for a particular topic. It looks like it was about the Bible and humanism, so maybe some different philosophic thoughts. It's really hard to read, obviously, because there is a lot of information on there. And also, it's in very small print in lots of different colors. So this is a bad example for a lot of reasons. So small text, too many different colors. Typically, you want to limit your colors to one or two colors. As you noticed throughout my slide presentation, I'm using like a black and a blue and then a white background and black text. Keep it simple. When I was coming through college, I was always wanting to use like yellows and greens and blues and stuff like that. And that's cool, but you have to really limit it to colors that are palatable for everybody. So even though you may like the flare, I would encourage you to be boring. Blue is a really good color to use because it's calming and it can help engage your presenters. So keep that in mind, and really the more simplistic you can get with your visual aid in terms of colors, the better. Another reason why this particular visual aid is just not good at all is they're using like a picture background for their slides. This makes it really hard to read, especially the text that is like almost the same color as the background. So I would really discourage you from doing that unless you are showing just the picture. So don't use a picture as a slide background. Okay, here's another example. This one is from when John Boehner was the Speaker of the House in the U.S. government. So much better slide. Obviously, the colors are a lot more easier and palatable to read. We've got like a blue background with white writing, so that's good. The only critique I would have of this particular slide is there is an awful lot of information on here. So this is what I would recommend that you not do. Because these are full-on sentences in this slide. So what I would encourage you to do is, this first sentence says, sets up a new sequestrian process to cut spending across the board, and then it goes into detail. So maybe you could just put new sequestrian process and then go into detail about all these different things. That allows you to have information your presenters don't have, and that will prevent them from simply reading it and then ignoring you until you move to the next slide. Excuse me. Okay, here's another example. Once again, colors are a lot better than the first example we looked at. It's a little too vibrant though. The yellow can be kind of hard to read. And then if you didn't already notice, there's a typo in it. So always make sure you're reading carefully and making sure that there's no typos or silly things like that. I know for me, when I see a visual aid with a typo, I immediately think this person didn't review it very carefully. And it's really easy. I want to make that clear. I'm not judging them in the sense that we are all infallible, but at the same point, that's why we have to check it a lot. So just make sure that you review it carefully so that you catch those typos, and don't just use the spell check because the spell check will only catch words that are spelled incorrectly. There may be a word that is spelled correctly, but it's the wrong word you intended to use. So definitely keep an eye out for that as well. We have definitely been talking about that throughout this. So I want to talk about a few techniques. So I'm sure you have seen various PowerPoints that abuse clip art. Clip art is those little, I don't think I have one in this example. But they have those little like stick figure guys that are doing things, and different like cute little images like that. Really try to limit the use of that. If you use one or two, it's not a bad thing. But you really don't want to have those like on every slide. Okay. You want to try to use visual information such as that, like pictures and stuff, only when it's helpful to the audience. So I included a PowerPoint ID, or not ID, a logo here when we're talking about PowerPoint. Um, I included Homer here for audience involvement. So just keep in mind, you want to use that stuff so that it's easy to connect. Certainly don't include images just to break up the monotony. Use it when it's purposeful. You also want to use the same template for your whole presentation. So you notice that my PowerPoint has the same slides. Do not use like one picture background for one slide, then hop over to this format and then to this format. That can be really confusing for audiences, and it can also be just really hard to follow what in the world's going on. I've already talked about text cramming, but certainly avoid using paragraphs in your presentations. Short information statements so that you can basically as a cue for you to recall that information is really all you need. And above all, you just want to keep your PowerPoint simple. Really don't overcomplicate this. The PowerPoint should come after the fact, right? And I say PowerPoint, I mean visual aid, whatever tool you use. But you really want to use this as a way to help you and the audience understand your material. You absolutely don't want to craft the PowerPoint first and then deliver your presentation. So have your presentation idea pretty well panned out, have a good idea of what you're doing. And then after that, you want to really hone in on what that visual aid looks like. So what I would recommend doing for your final presentations, look at the syllabus and answer those questions. Maybe type out an outline of what you want to cover, and then start delivering that presentation, practicing it, and then craft your visual aid, okay? Because you really want the information to inform your presentation, and then your presentation inform what visual aid you need to help your audience and others understand your content. Okay. These are some other techniques. These are more technical rather than just general presentation techniques. You want to use a pretty large font size. I believe the font size that I used here is 30. You want to use a larger font size because, especially when it's on a projector, it projects a lot smaller than you think. So even though this looks huge when you're making it, it looks really nice for the audience members. So 30 size font is usually the gold standard there. We've talked about flamboyant colors. Keep it simple there, really basic stuff. We talked about the eye test. You want to be crafty in the sense that you don't want to have essentially slides that all look like these two. If your slides are all the same, that can be really boring. So you want to have some images and different things. Certainly you can use images, graphs, maps, whatever is relevant to your content. But also make sure that it's purposeful. You can't be delivering a presentation on your biology major and then out of the blue include a map of Lord of the Rings unless it's relevant, okay? Which I can't think of a reason why it would be relevant at this moment. But just be thinking about ways that you can connect your audience to various mediums throughout your presentation. And as you have probably already gathered, I can be quite a critic when it comes to PowerPoints. And I hope that this will help some of you improve your skills as well. Being able to critique slides and visual aids and presentations will only help you become a stronger presenter yourself. So that concludes the discussion on creating and delivering effective presentations. like I said, this is more of a test run for everyone. I'm not going to slam you really hard in terms of your grade on, like, if you say or you have parts where you forget information. But I'm absolutely going to critique you on it and give you that information back, because I want this to be more of a learning experience for you rather than, this is another grade in the book and it forces you to lose points, that sort of thing. Keep in mind, you want to keep your presentations to about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to hop over here to the syllabus just so we can talk about a few things there. Sorry, clicked on the wrong syllabus. Okay, so let me scroll down here. Okay, so your final project and presentation, these are the criteria that you want to talk about. You want to spend a good amount of time, because keep in mind, I'm expecting 3 to 5, 4 to 6 minutes, somewhere in that range. So, typically you can budget about a minute per slide, and that's if you go slowly. So if you know ahead of time you're a fast talker, you may need to have enough content to last that out. Now, the good news is for this particular assignment, you could present and you not like it and you do it over again before you even submit it. So I would certainly encourage you to do that. Make sure what you're submitting is really your best work. Don't just throw something together and push it forward. But like I said, your final project is on your major and all that entails. So take a look here. Hopefully you watched Brenda's video last week from the library, because that gives some good information on Reference USA and also the databases that the library has. Obviously, you can still access those even though you may or may not be on campus or in Muncie. So definitely take a gander at those as well. So I'm really going to wrap up this time. This is definitely a long enough video. I apologize, it's 32 minutes long. But like I said, please stay in touch if you need anything, and please stay healthy. I know these times are very challenging, so my advice to you is, even though you may not be leaving your house very often, definitely get outside, go for a walk, get a breath of fresh air. I'm guilty of that as well, being in the house for multiple days. So take advantage of that. Just because there's a stay-at-home order and you're not supposed to be out except for essential activities doesn't mean you can't go for a walk or get some fresh air. So if you need anything at all, especially if you have questions about your other classes, please, please, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'd be happy to help. And if there's anything at all that I can do to help you in our class, please do let me know. I'm going to be trying to make regular kind of check-in videos and announcements more often, because I know we're getting towards crunch time here. So I want to be there for you. But thank you, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.